The Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliate stations coast to coast present
Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue.
The 0-2, swing and a miss, strike three, blew it past it.
Discussing baseball, good drinks, and food.
And you got your honey mustard?
I love mustard.
With Ted Hicks and Lee Vowell.
Well, big deal. I am very professional.
On the Happy Hour Network.
And we are live again on Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern. Welcome to Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue. Like us on Facebook, follow us on the Twitter at Baseball Beer BBQ, and read us on our blog site, baseballbeerbbq.com. We have a huge show today talking about MLB, I can say that word, MLB acronym, I guess. It's not even a word, right? Playoffs, roundtable style with NGSC Sports in the batter's box, co-hosts Ralph Garcia and John Doucette. Ted, how are you today?
I am great. How are you doing today?
You know, I'm doing probably less well than you, just because you still have a team that is playing in the playoffs this evening. So, you know.
I want to say M-E-T-S, Mets, but maybe that's not appropriate because the Dodgers lost. And I'm sorry, Lee.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were a Blue Jays fan. That's what I was talking about. Mets. No, when did this happen? Is this something new? I don't know what's going on.
Oh, my goodness. I will say hello, Brooklyn. And how you – wait, the Mets aren't in Brooklyn. Wait, the Islanders are in Brooklyn. Okay, I'm totally out of whack here, but happy to be here. It was a great game, great series. Before we even jump into that, I know we got a lot of things we got to do. First and foremost, bunch of people. I mean, this is going to be a big show, a really big show.
Really big shoe.
But want to thank our friends at I-95 Sports Network, Backpage Sports, RF Sports, XRP Radio out in the UK. And I guess NGSC Sports, since they're coming on today, we got to play nice with them because they power us through the iHeart Radio app that's online. Big shout out to CJ Computer Services that provides the best computer-related services, and that's not just your local keyboard fixing and, you know, replacing the mouse or even going down to your motherboard or anything else like that. We're talking about streaming TV. We're talking everything. They do it all at CJ Computer Services. Catch them online at cjcomputerservices.net. Lee, I'll give it back to you because it's an exciting time to be in New York.
Yeah, I bet it is. And I was looking at the outline, and I was like, man, I really hope I have the right outline pulled up. Otherwise, it'll be, who knows, it'll be like a Wagner opera. We'll have all kinds of stuff going on. So, yeah, but let's update everybody on ALCS American League Championship Series last night. The Royals over the Blue Jays 5-0. Were you able to watch any of this?
You said the Astros beat the Rangers last night?
That is correct. The Astros over the Rangers 5-0.
All right, way to go. I didn't get a chance to watch any of the ALCS last night, but I caught the highlights this morning, or should I say lowlights for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, really.
You know, so once again, something that has the ability to go the distance. I mean, we could be looking at two series that goes 7 games. What's your thoughts on last night's game?
It was so one-sided. It was not exciting baseball. Edison Volquez looked really, really good. Pitched 6 innings. The 6th inning, he had some trouble, got a couple of guys on, but it was Donaldson and Batista, so it wasn't like scrubs were getting on. And then he struck out the last 2. I mean, he looked impressive. And, you know, anytime you shut out the Blue Jays, that says a lot because they're obviously a very high-scoring team. And, you know, 5-0, you know, they're in Kansas City. They need to win those first 2. They don't have to win, but they need to win those first 2. So It's not a surprise that Kansas City won. They're a good team, and it should be. I think 7 games is, you never want to make that prediction really because anything could happen in a series. But 7 games, yeah, I can see that for both these series. That would be another good thing for baseball besides, the Mets, the Cubs, and the Blue Jays and the Royals, even though they're a smaller market, being in the playoffs this deep. Did you know the 7th inning of the Rangers Blue Jays got its own special last night before the game started? Did you see that?
I did not see that, but there was so much talk about a 53-minute inning.
Yes, as we talked about a little bit on Thursday, but the 53-minute 7th inning on Wednesday in Toronto started with the teams tied 2-2 in the top of the inning, and then Texas player Odor scored the go-ahead run with 2 outs when Blue Jays catcher Russell Martin his throwback to the pitcher hit Shin Soo Choo, and the ball rolled up the third base line. Fans pelted the field. I guess everybody's seen that. Fans have pelted the field with debris during an 18-minute delay. And then in the bottom of the inning, the Rangers committed 3 straight errors, so it's just craziness happening, to help Toronto tie the score. And then Jose Bautista hit a 3-run homer, complete with that bat flip, which is, the whole inning is just crazy, yeah, but it got its own special on Fox before last night's game, so it was cool. A couple other things real fast before we are joined by our wonderful guests, Ralph Garcia and John Doucette of NGSC Sports' In the Batter's Box. Of course, the Cubs and the Mets kick off tonight. Ted, what was your initial reaction? What was your emotional reaction to Daniel Murphy's home run?
Lee, I cried, I laughed. I kind of felt like the night that my firstborn arrived here back in 2001. It was one of those moments where that just changed my life. It really did. No, I listen. As you know, and it's funny because nationally the world is getting to see the Mets, where I'm a fan, so I watch them. Every night or every other night on SNY TV. And knowing that Daniel Murphy is the scrappy player who's always out there fighting and looking for that edge at any given opportunity, the home run was great. The home runs this series were great. The heads-up play was vintage Murphy. And I was a little slightly pissed off at Ron Darling because he's on the local cast. That I guess he was a little bit kind of taken back because he couldn't get into full Homerville. But this is Daniel Murphy type baseball. These are Daniel Murphy type plays. That scrappiness. I think Murphy is one thing. But Terry Collins, I got to give him big thumbs up for not only just a great game managed and coached, out-coaching Donnie Baseball, but
I think the whole country did that. I think the whole country.
Yeah. But we'll get into that a little bit later on my Homerville and fandom, and I kind of called. Mets over Dodgers in 5 only because Greinke and Kershaw. Only because of Greinke and Kershaw. So, hey, really, really excited. Thursday night was great. It made going to work that much easier on Friday.
Yeah, I bet. And I wasn't surprised that the series went the way it was. The Dodgers seem to be perennially disappointing when it comes to October, and I'm, of course, a Dodgers fan, so I can say that. But, yeah, Mattingly should be gone. He's just not a very good manager. Just, as we tweeted out during the game, having Seager, a rookie, no matter how good he could potentially be, having him swing on 3-0 when you've got men on base, that's the pitch may have been a strike anyway, but it sets up the rest of the at-bat. It lets the pitcher know, okay, he swung and missed at that. This is what I can do. It was just really poorly. And then the whole fiasco with the whole thing with, not covering third base and Seager not covering third base, or Greinke not covering third base, and then Ethier catching the foul ball that allowed the run to score when he should have just knocked it down, because Greinke actually has a penchant for striking people out in that situation. It was just it was just one of those things where it was like, you know what, this is how it should be. I'm not even surprised this is happening. It's very, 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 very sad. So, yeah, I mean, Zach Greinke, of course, as we've joked around about, he is a future Cub. So, you know, the Cubs are going to be great. They're going to be great for several years. We're going to have Lester, and we're going to have Arrieta, and we're going to have Greinke, and they're going to be phenomenal. So, we are going to be joined in just a second by Ralph Garcia and John Doucette of NGSC Sports' In the Batter's Box. Ted, any other words you want to say before we're joined by our guest?
No, it's just we got to put on our A game, because this is competition. This is like if Fox and TBS did kind of like a simulcast together, and they were, you know, I don't know. We're pushing all the chips on the table. We got John and Ralph coming on. So, Lee, be on your A game. That's all I'm going to say. Be on your A game, because these guys, I heard they're pretty good.
Well, I'll tell you the same thing I told my baseball coach in high school. I only have a C game, so C's the best you're going to get. Honestly, yeah, I want to have an A game, but I just don't have that natural skill to be able to have the A game. So, you know, it'll be interesting. We actually have someone in queue. Let's see who we have. Hi, is this John or Ralph?
Well, it could be both of us, but you'll take one to begin with, won't you?
We will take as many of you as possible.
All right. Hey. I guess that means it's both of us.
I guess it did,
awesome.
Yes.
Well, usually the one number, it scares me. Ted and I were like, there's just one. There's just one person. So anyway, John Doucette and Ralph Garcia of In the Batter's Box of NGSC Sports, thanks for being on and talking baseball with us today.
Well, let's face it, guys. This is the best time of year when the month of October is always really what it's all about. Once you get past the 162 games, and once you get past the 30 spring training games in March, this is really what it all comes down to.
John, are you a Red Sox fan?
I am, yes.
Okay. I knew you lived in Massachusetts. I knew you lived in Massachusetts.
Now wait a minute. I didn't. There was no reason for the booing in the background. What was that all about?
It was not.
I don't know. It must be a big person on the show. I heard it too.
Wow.
That's funny. So Ted, you want to kick us off?
Sure. It's happy to have John and Ralph on the show of NGSC Sports, our partners, our friends, label mates, all the above, to discuss MLB playoffs. I guess first question that I'm going to throw out is, now that the Dodgers are out of the playoffs, will Mattingly be let go, and should he be let go? And a follow-up question to the panel is, how far can the Dodgers go with their current roster? I'll throw that out to the professor, John Doucette, out the gate.
Look, I think that heads will roll. I don't see how they don't. The Dodgers have had problems getting past, if it's not the division round, it's the League Championship Series. It's a team that was built to win world championships. It was a team that was built to contend for world championships. That was the purpose here. You've got a $300 million payroll that the Dodgers have put out there, and I do think you can probably question how this money was spent. Kershaw and Greinke at the top of that rotation are dynamite, a tremendous 1-2 combination. But then after that, your third spot, your fourth spot, your fifth spot in that rotation, that can be questioned. You've got some younger players that have come up through the farm system that I do think will provide the Dodgers with some hope as time goes along. But I just think the mix that's been put together by ownership and by that front office, it's just not good enough to be able to get them to where they want to be.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I'm the Dodgers fan, Ralph. I'm not sure who you follow, but I've been a Dodgers fan my entire life, and I'll say this: Mattingly definitely, just based on Game 5 alone almost needs to be let go. The Dodgers are not going to be able to move forward any more than they already have with him as a manager. It seems like the players don't respect him, and it wasn't just the Ethier issue the other night where he's screaming at Mattingly in the dugout. You know, it's happened several times throughout the season, even when he's taken. Kershaw is a very volatile player when he actually is pitching. On the off days, not so much, but you've seen him scream at Mattingly in the dugout several times throughout the season after he's been taken out of a game. You wouldn't see that with Tony La Russa, for instance, or Joe Madden, for instance. They just have a better rapport with the players, and I think Mattingly might be a good guy, but he needs to be let go from the Dodgers. And as far as the current roster of the Dodgers, I mean, Puig, I don't know he never stays healthy. When he's on the field this year, he wasn't very good. I think they need to make some changes. They've got some good young players coming up, but some of their older players are starting to produce a little bit less, and they signed Rollins, they may re-sign Kendrick. We'll see what happens with that, but they had a lot of stopgaps. So next year, hopefully, it'll be better with a better manager. Ralph, what are your thoughts?
Well, I do think. Before Ralph jumps in, I would just say you've got Greinke right off the bat that you've got to deal with. He's going to opt out of that contract. So if the Dodgers are going to bring him back, what does the number start at?
Well, look, guys, first and foremost, let me make it really clear so that there's never a question again. I grew up in Shea Stadium. I grew up where you gotta believe. I grew up where it says, meet the Mets, come on out and greet the Mets. So if there's any other questions as to who I root for, please log on to Periscope and check out the latest In the Batter's Box, and you'll see my not so pretty face, but you'll see the logos of my team, and yes, it says New York Mets. To the question, meaning that I'm a Met fan, I can't stand the Yankees, okay? So let's get that straight. So even if my Mets got eliminated, I would have been grateful for a great season, but even more grateful that the Yankees were eliminated first. That means more. If we're not going to win a World Series championship, then by God, the second pleasure we get out of a baseball season is having the Yankees make the playoffs and immediately be eliminated. Glad that's done. But Don Mattingly, we know what he brought to baseball as a baseball player. You watched his career. It's guys like this that you watch and wonder if later on when they're finished playing, are they going to go ahead and make the transition into coaching and management? Obviously, Mattingly did. Mattingly, of course, you would think right away when the Yankee jobs were open, is Mattingly? Well, he went to Los Angeles. John brought up a good point. You're looking at a team right now. We know that, what do they say about payrolls? Payrolls are supposed to run or determine where you'll end up in the season. You know something? History proves that it doesn't matter how much you pay your players. If you don't get the right mix of players, then nothing's going to happen. This goes back to 1988. There are a lot of teams like the beloved Chicago Cubs who would love to say, it's only been since 88 since we won. You know something? In Los Angeles, that might as well be eternity. And they got a lot of decisions to make right here, starting one with Mattingly. I do believe that he's gone. And somebody has to pay the price right off the top. That's always the manager. Remember, here's the sorry thing about sports. General managers and those above are held less accountable, or at least are the second tier to pay for the mistakes.
Absolutely. There you go.
When you have a $300 million+ payroll and you bring in a Don Mattingly and you get that talent in there, you look beyond Mattingly. You look at the front offices. You are the guys that made the decisions to bring these guys here. And when you make these decisions, what kills me when teams do this is the fact that you just don't bring anybody here. Sports is about chemistry. I don't care which sport you play. If you don't play together and can't play together, what are you going to do? Bring a bunch of high price and you see what happens? So here we are now where we talked about Greinke. Highly unlikely Greinke's going to resign. You've got Howie Kendrick. Now Jimmy Rollins he played until Seager took his place. You know, there are options. The club holds option on Utley. Boo! I don't want to get all personal there. Joey Peralta, Bronson Arroyo. There's so many decisions to make. And if you ask Clayton Kershaw, and he's already said it, he wants guys like Greinke to come back. what's going to happen? This is going to be a serious thing, a serious situation going on in L.A. because we could be looking at a team right now that's been at least contending the past few years, and 2016 might get bleak real quick.
I'll even take it one step further. Let's say the Dodgers had won Game 5. Game 1 starter tonight would have been Brett Anderson. Enough said.
It totally is. I'm just going to jump in and say the fact that the Mets had to face Greinke and Kershaw 2 times, it seems like they had nothing else behind that.
Exactly.
And we saw it.
And that's why I say, if the Dodgers had won, tonight would have been Brett Anderson against John Lester. That's a bad matchup if you're a Dodger fan.
Yeah, that's true. They could have gone with Alex Wood, who, he I don't know.
I'm not even sure that's a better match. I mean, that's the problem for the Dodgers, which goes back to what I said. You spend $300 million, but I'm not sure that it was spent in the proper direction that would have given the Dodgers a legitimate chance to pull this off.
Yeah. Possibly. I think they were saving Alex Wood, the greatness of Alex Wood, until the World Series. I thought they could just write it. No, I'm totally joking.
You got to get there first.
Yeah, I know. I'm totally joking. So let's move on to the American League Championship Series, which started last night. We'll get your take on this first, John. Who do you think is going to win this series, and how do they win? Which would be better for baseball, in your opinion, Toronto or Kansas City in the World Series? Because Toronto, if they were an American city, they'd actually be the 5th largest TV market in the United States. Of course, they are the TV market, really, in Canada. And, of course, Rogers Group owns all the broadcasting up there and everything like that. And who do you personally want to see win this series, and why?
Well, I think the Royals will win, and I think you saw it last night. I think it was put on display. The power arms that they've got in that bullpen, I just think even without Greg Holland, they still have enough power arms in that bullpen to make it work. And I think last night was quite an example of how they're going to do it. I thought Edison Volquez last night was very good. He just pitched better than Marco Estrada did. And the Royals still have enough bats in that lineup, and they still have incentive from last year to make that run back to a World Series and this time finish it off. With the way that Johnny Cueto pitched in Game 5 for them, that was the good Johnny Cueto in the division series. And as I said last night, they've got to find a way to bottle that so that Cueto can continue doing that through the League Championship Series into the World Series, because that's the kind of dominating performance that they traded for when they made that deal with Cincinnati back in July. Who would I like to see? It would be great to see Toronto make it. Absolutely. I think that being that they are the only baseball team up there in Canada, and although we are talking about a hockey town, plain and simple, still, I think that the Blue Jays, you've seen the crowds, you've seen the enthusiasm. Rogers Center is rocking again like it did in the early 90s when Joe Carter and that gang was up there. I think Toronto is a viable market when it comes to baseball, but I just don't think they've got enough arms in that bullpen. And I'm not sure they've got enough arms in that starting staff to be able to make this work.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think the Royals are going to win it, and I think it may go 7. I think Toronto is the kind of team that's built more for just power, and usually that doesn't pay off very well in the playoffs, as we've seen with Kansas City the last couple of years. If you can get on base, you can kind of create chaos, and then things happen from there, and then having that dominant bullpen at the end. That's one thing they have that Toronto doesn't have. Of course, I think the pitching matchup favored Kansas City last night, and they were at home. So, Toronto still has a chance, but I do think it's going to go 6 or 7 games. I think it'll go 7, and I think Kansas City will win it just because of their ability to get on base and their ability to shut down the game, finish the game after 6 innings, really. As far as who I think it would be better for being in the World Series, Toronto or Kansas City, it's interesting because the Thursday night game, it featured the Dodgers and the Mets, New York and Los Angeles. The overnight TV ratings were 5.8, I think. The football game between the Falcons and the Saints was a 10. Obviously, you can't compare football and baseball, but even with those two large markets in baseball, baseball playoffs only getting about half as many viewers as football, which, we're baseball fans, and that's kind of sad to see. So I don't know if it makes much of a difference if Toronto, a huge market, is in the World Series versus Kansas City. But, personally, I'd like to see Toronto in the World Series just because I I'm not a chick, but I still dig the long ball kind of thing. So, I like to see Toronto hit home runs.
Hey, Lee, I want to jump in. Hey, Lee, I want to just jump in and just make one slight comparison. The fact of the matter is it might have been a 5 share versus a 10, but that's network TV versus cable. So it's a lot closer than what we think it is.
But it's still
right.
But still it's cable, it's TBS, and I know not everybody has cable, but it's basic cable. Most people have that nowadays.
Right, but if you take the flip side to it, and you look at the markets, the local markets that night for Thursday night, it was an 11 share in Los Angeles, 17 in New York. If you look at just based on those two cities and the population, I mean, it was a big hit for those two big markets. But overall, point taken.
I think 11's not high enough, though, still, for, your team in the playoffs. I don't think 11 is high enough. It needs to be higher. I mean, obviously, you can't compare,
but again,
Seahawks
we're talking Los Angeles here.
Well, that's the problem.
True, but even 17 in New York isn't high enough, I don't think.
Isn't high either. That's the city of Los Angeles, and that's sad that in the city of Los Angeles that you're going to get an 11 rating in the middle of the NLDS. And as far as this Kansas City, Toronto, I picked Toronto last night on our show in the batter's box. John and I were discussing, number one, Kansas City comes in with the mindset. Guys, last year the Kansas City was the team, the question mark, the dark horse, the wild card, literally. And they came out of nowhere and made that run to the World Series, and that this year would be the year that, how it goes. You got to prove that last year wasn't a fluke, and Kansas City came out of the gate, and they proved the whole season long. Not only is it not a fluke, we're one of the best teams in baseball, period, including that other team in Missouri. So now you see the KC. I like to talk about mindsets, because historically, those teams, those universities, those organizations that win historically, their front offices have that mentality. It carries all the time. When you're a loser, and it stays with you, and you're always trying to get out of it. Toronto finds itself now in a position like Kansas City last year. So right now, as you get into this series, first of all, who's the more confident team? It's like a boxing match. One of the fighters in that ring knows, I'm better than him. I belong here, and I deserve to go further, and that's Kansas City right now. Like John pointed out, I mean, Boquez last night, of course, he had that half-hour, 37-pitch, sixth inning that you didn't know how that was going to turn out. And, of course, there was the plan was to pitch inside to these power hitters of Toronto, and he and Salvador Perez decided to change their mind, and you see the command that Boquez had on that fastball. They had it down and away, which is really good. And so long as Cueto and the Kansas City pitching staff pitches like this, I don't think it'll make a difference. The only thing that concerns me is, that when teams get on a hitting streak, look at the Cubs and what happened once they went home, and teams can get on a power streak. If that happens with a team like Toronto, we watched the second half of the season what Toronto did offensively. If that team can show up for a week, 2 weeks, they can beat anybody.
And well, let's face it, if Edwin Encarnacion is really injured and it was a ligament strain on that middle finger, if he can't grip a bat and if he can't be a part of the middle of that Blue Jay order, that's a significant bat that's been lost to that team, and I don't think they can make up for it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Ted, you have any thoughts on last night's game?
Not at all. Like I said at the start of the show, I'm expecting this to go 7. I'm probably in a league by myself because, yes, the Royals did look great last night, and the Blue Jays didn't. But I'm expecting both of these series to stretch out, and we're going to see a lot of similarities as in the divisional series. What were you saying, Ralph?
I was agreeing that this is going to be a 6-7 game series. I don't see either one of these series. Ain't nobody going to sweep anybody. So.
Nope.
Oh, no, and I would agree with that. Look, this is a big afternoon for David Price. I mean, can David Price be for the Blue Jays what Madison Bumgarner was for the Giants in the World Series? Can he do that for the Jays and pretty much put that team on his back and get them to a World Series? I think that's that's a question that is going to certainly be thrown out there based on Price's track record in the postseason.
I'm going to go to the next topic, which is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Please, no references to Back to the Future. I've heard those references enough. But obviously, the Cubs are a great story. Cubs win. You know, I mean.
Hey, that movie's going to get redistributed if they win a World Series. There's no question about it. That movie is going to go back out there.
Guess what? On the 21st, anyone who's a member of Amazon, like Amazon Prime, that movie, all three, the trilogy, is being redistributed for free for download and viewing for next weekend. I'm like, oh my goodness. Anyone jump on?
It won't be free if the Cubs win a World Series, I'll tell you that. It'll be back in cinemas all across the country, especially in Chicago, so that for a generation that has no idea what we're talking about, they'll get to see it.
Now, I want to say real quick, and I won't make any other reference to that movie. Now, remember that the Sports Illustrated, the magazine said that the Cubs would beat a team from Miami. Now, it ain't true, but boy, by coincidence, they just happened to be a team in Miami in 2015.
I know. Okay, I'll leave that alone. So here's my three questions. First to the professor, and then to Ralph. The first one is: are the Cubs the new America's team if they win the World Series? If they make it to the World Series and they win the World Series. Question two: how good should they be long term, since they have so many young players? And the trifecta is, and this is, a rhetorical question: is Theo Epstein underrated as a front office leader? So first to the professor, and then back to Ralph, and then to Lee.
Well, I saw Theo work his magic here in Boston, he and Jed Hoyer. So the blueprint that was used to create what turned out to be the 2004 World Championship for the Red Sox is pretty much the same blueprint that he's using to create this opportunity for the Cubs. He's done it through the draft, he's done it through the minor league system, and has created the team that I think does have a chance to be a pretty good long-term project for Cub fans. The only thing that I think could really eventually break the core up is going to be salary arbitration and free agency, but that's going to be down the road. This team is going to be good for the next 2, 3, maybe even 4 years. And go back to the beginning of the year when they sent Chris Bryant to AAA and all the criticism that they took for doing that. The reason why they did it was so they could have him for an extra year, so that his service time would still be within the limits for the Cubs. And again, it speaks to Theo and Jed Hoyer being able to understand how the process works and how to get the most out of it while they can. Is the Cubs going to be America's team? Well, I experienced the Red Sox winning in 2004, and there was that thought that they would become America's team with breaking the curse as they did. I don't think they really became America's team for even a small window of time. Maybe the Cubs might, just based on it's a longer period of time for them than it was for the Red Sox. But still, I think that I don't know if there is an America's team in baseball like there is in football with the Cowboys, although I don't think the Cowboys are America's team anymore. I don't think there is one in baseball, and I think that's I don't think that's a bad thing.
Well, my response to the America's team is this. The thing that you mentioned with the Boston Red Sox, John, back then is, remember with the Boston Red Sox, that was a team with veterans, professionals.
Right, it was.
The professionals that had been there, mentors to the young kids, and that was a team that was not full of young kids. And so, my opinion was it was hard to embrace those Red Sox as America's team because they were brash, they were confident, they were cocky, and that Red Sox team was a tough, hard-nosed Red Sox team, and it's kind of hard for me to equate that with America's team. But when you come to the Chicago Cubs, and you look at it as, here's a bunch of young kids literally having fun, enjoying a baseball season unlike any other Chicago Cub team has enjoyed in over 100 years. This is an organization that had been filled with negativity, with the stigma, not with a monkey on its back, but with an entire planet of the apes on its backs. Not just the team, the city, everybody involved, fans all over the world have waited and waited and waited and waited. And each time they got close, a bartman happened, somebody made a mistake. And let me ask everyone listening, everyone who will listen and think about this, when the Cubs were that close to winning the other night, how many Cub fans you thought were sitting there with that sinking feeling in their stomach, sick, knowing that there is no way we're going to accept this victory and celebrate it until that third out is official? There wasn't. You looked at the TV broadcast. There was no. You didn't see cocky fans out there. They were praying, God, please don't let...
wait a minute. There weren't any cocky fans in '04 for the Red Sox either. I mean, I was in that ballpark for the Division Series, for the League Championship Series, and for the World Series. There were plenty of people that were doing the praying bit like you mentioned with the Cubs.
No, when it comes to that, John, it had to be similar in Boston. I'm just saying that the team, I don't know if they will be America's team, but the term fits because it's just a bunch of young kids, and that's what you would embrace as America's team. And when you talk about question 2 about long-term, listen, this Chicago Cubs team, they've got not just young players, they got some damn good young players. And Arrieta's fantastic. What happens if a Greinke does wind up in Chicago? And you got to start thinking, Chicago, a history of they're not going anywhere, is now one of the prime spots in baseball for free agency. If you're a player, why don't you want to go to Chicago and be a part of something special, which leads me to the Theo Epstein question. Guys, think about it. The New York Yankees, the Brooklyn Dodgers, Chicago Cubs, the Boston Red Sox. I mean, that is hundreds combined, hundreds and hundreds of years of original baseball tradition. And the Cubs and the Red Sox, unfortunately, not anymore for the Red Sox, held the distinction of having to wait a century or better for a world title. And I've never been a Red Sox fan, and I never will be, but you couldn't help but be happy for Boston and its fans. And John, I can't imagine the feeling across that state and that entire area when finally there were people who were in their 90s who had never witnessed it, and the Boston Red Sox finally won a title. Now Theo Epstein is about, and if it isn't this year, I sure believe it's going to happen. Joe Madden. We talk about acquisitions after the All-Star break, off-season trades. We wait for those blockbusters. Whoa, did you see who so-and-so got? The greatest and biggest acquisition in the off-season in baseball before the season began was Joe Madden to the Chicago Cubs, a guy who took a Tampa Bay Ray team from infancy, and we see what he did. Theo Epstein will soon become something that no one else will ever be again. The only man to lead 2 franchises to wait a century or more to World Series titles. Yes, you better believe he's underrated.
Oh, and that's something that Theo is well aware of too, by the way.
Well, I have this. I don't live in Boston, but we have we've had several Boston fans, people who cover the Red Sox on this show, and it seems like there's kind of a general disdain for Theo Epstein. Even when he was there, and maybe I've been told that Boston fans don't really like the ownership of their teams. Maybe not Robert Kraft, but the other ones for whatever reason. Maybe it's just part of the culture.
Well,
I don't know.
You're right about Jeremy Jacobs with the Bruins, and you're right about Robert Kraft is kind of like God around here. There's no denying that, but you're right about Jeremy Jacobs, and I think the Celtic ownership, you could probably go either way. I think Danny Ainge is probably lovable, but I think Wick Rosberg and that group, they've had their moments. And yeah, the Red Sox ownership has certainly had their good moments and their bad moments as well, because they've meddled in other things with regards to television and so forth that I think the fan base would prefer that they not meddle in. But I think if they're winning, everything's fine around here. If you're losing, well, yeah, that's when the daggers are going to come out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe there's fans up there that are like, they spend way too much time on Liverpool than they do in Boston. I don't know.
Exactly, but, yes.
Yeah, a couple of comments. First of all, I'm still mad about the Chris Bryant thing because they would have finished second in the NL Central instead of third if he'd played that extra few games. I'm joking, of course. And as far as Back to the Future in Chicago, if they played that tomorrow on TBS, it would get a bigger than 17 share in Chicago, I'm sure. So that goes to show how Cubs fans care about their team. And as far as the America's team question, it was funny because I was in New Orleans on Tuesday and watched a lot of the game. And then, my wife wants to walk around downtown, and of course I'm not going to say no to my wife. We can't walk around down New Orleans since we're here. So, we walked around. There's a lot of bars in New Orleans, and I will say several of them are sports bars, and all of them had the Cubs game on, which was good to see. Not just it wasn't just they were showing random stuff. They had the Cubs game on, and I actually passed by a bar. I wanted to see the ninth inning. And he got those last two strikeouts. And when he got that last strikeout, the bar erupted. And I was in New Orleans. So it was like there's all these fans everywhere who root for the Cubs. And maybe Chicago is a big city. People, they send people out there. Their people visit other cities, I know. But it's one of these things where even New Orleans, there still was such a great Cubs contingent watching the game in a sports bar that, I can see America's team, that's kind of an overused phrase, I think, a little bit, but I can see the Cubs, especially if they win the World Series this year or next year or the year after, definitely becoming, quote-unquote, a baseball's America's team. And as far as long-term success, I live near their Double-A team, which is loaded. Of course, they're sending players up and down all the time, mostly up. But they're not only loaded with position players, they're loaded with pitchers as well. So they have position players, no Addison Russell this round, of course, but they have position players who are young, very skilled, and very good and produced at an early level already. Chris Bryant, Javier Baez strikes out a lot, but he had the big home run the other day. But their pitching is going to be good, too, even to back up Lester and Arrieta, and if they get Greinke or somebody else, because they're not going to stand pat and just allow their farm system to be what drives the team. They're going to sign players as well because they have money to do that. So long term, this team could be good 5-10 years from now. We should be entrenched on talking Cubs when it comes to playoffs, really, for the next several years.
I do think the problem for the Cubs is going to be salary arbitration. It will be free agency. How much money is this ownership group going to be willing to spend to keep this core together?
I think that's a good point. I think they, eventually, but Chris Bryant is not till 2021. They've got so many young players that are going to be here for 5 years that, they will worry about that, obviously. And a lot of those players, they won't be able to re-sign because if they continue to progress as they have been, we're looking at huge contracts. So, if they sign 2 of those guys, that might be a lot of money. There's no way they're going to keep all of them probably. But I think their farm system is still good enough, and they're in a position where they can sign players other than who they're just bringing up in the farm system, but they don't really even have to worry about that for several years, really, except for pitching, I think.
And I think that's a good thing for the Cubs because it'll provide them with enough time to make, hopefully, the right decisions on which guys to keep and which guys to either use as trade bait or even allow them to go as free agents and take the compensation draft picks that they'll get to continue to restock that farm system.
Excellent point. That's a great point, seriously. Ted, do you have thoughts on Cubs?
Just that they're going to lose to the Mets starting tonight.
Very good.
Wow, that was quick. That was very good. Very good, yes.
That's an excellent point. Wow. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, no, when we think about it, their payroll is at $116 million. Well, the 2015 payroll is at $116 million. That's number 12. That's number 12 on, of the teams this year. It's not Dodger-like or Yankee-like payroll, but it's right there in the middle. And it's a higher payroll than the Mets by about $16 million. So, yes, contracts are going to come up. Some of these younger players, these younger pitchers, it's going to cost. It's going to cost. So, but will they be here for the next few years? Yes, definitely. Is Theo a demigod? Yes. And if he pulls this off, with not only bringing back the Red Sox, but if he's able to, kill this curse and bring the Cubs in the next couple of years, hopefully not this year, then he's on Mount Rushmore of GMs, executive VPs for the rest of his life.
Hey, Ted, can I jump in for just a second? Because I want to talk about something Ralph hit on, which was Joe Madden being probably the best off-season acquisition for the Cubs, and without a doubt it probably was. One thing that Joe Madden does better, I think, than any manager, besides his just in-game skills, he lets his players play. And he's the perfect manager for those young guys because he just lets the young guys be young guys and play. And I think if they had a different manager, those young guys may not be having the success that they are having this year, and they also may not potentially be the great players that they should become. And I think they're lucky to have Joe Madden as the manager on that team.
Without a doubt, just to piggyback on that, and I will admit this because I admitted this to the folks in the mailroom at my job, that when Madden came available, I said to the guys in the mailroom, the Mets should be looking at Madden. Not that we don't respect Terry Collins, but Madden is one of those once-in-a-lifetime managers that can connect with those young players because we saw what he did in Tampa.
I will say this. If there is a concern for Met fans going into this series, it would be the possibility that Joe Madden can outmanage Terry Collins and possibly figure out ways to get the Cubs to a World Series.
Well, you know what, boys? I'm glad there's all this love and talk about the Chicago Cubs and the future and the World Series, but right now my stomach is turning a little bit because, by God, they're not winning the World Series this year.
You got that right.
Well, let's face it, the Mets have got young arms that you just can't ignore. There's no question about that.
That's right, what he said.
Yeah, the Mets
young
are
arms.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah, they're the kind of the anti-Cubs. I put that in the outline. Not because they handle their business differently necessarily. They do, but they have to as far as ownership goes. But they're kind of, they have the pitch. They don't really necessarily have the young stud position players, but what they do have is the young stud pitching staff. Where the Cubs' main pitchers, Lester and Arrieta, they're not old, but they're also not, 23, 24, 25. So it's kind of interesting to see that makeup. We're going to see young pitching versus young hitting and see how that plays out. One of those teams, whoever does the best when it comes to that, is going to make the World Series.
It is interesting that you're talking about two teams that have the same problem at the same position, which is shortstop.
And it's funny because Addison Russell he's not playing. He might fix some of that, and having Javier Baez strikes out a lot, has power, but his fielding is not great. So, Baez alone could actually kind of cost them one or two games just from his fielding, from his his range and his inconsistent throwing. Yeah, that is a problem. And you're welcome for that shortstop issue, Chase Utley. So there you
go. Ooh.
So I'm guessing we liked that Chase Utley slide, or we have a problem with that Chase Utley slide?
No, I'm a huge Dodgers fan, but that slide, that's not the first time he's done that slide. He's done that slide a lot of times.
Oh, I agree. It's not the first time. I agree.
It's a bad slide every time he does that. You shouldn't slide that late. The player getting injured was kind of piggybacked onto that, made it worse, but there's no way you should. It's not as bad as Reggie Jackson sticking out his leg when they're trying to throw the ball to Garvey. Yes, I'm that old to see the ball bounce into right field. But if I was anything but a Dodgers fan, I would be. I'd boo Utley in a second. He's not going to be a Dodger next year, so I'll feel free to boo him next year.
And if the slide doesn't happen, maybe, just maybe, it was a sweep, and we wouldn't even be talking about Game 4 and 5.
It's true. Ted, you're the Mets fan. What do you think? You are strong. Your Mets are definitely going to. I know you're saying they're going to win, but do you really have confidence that they're going to win this series?
Oh, definitely. We're going to win it, but like I said, it won't be easy, but we're definitely going to win it. I want to go into the next set of questions because the Mets are in a really interesting story as well. I mean, so I'm going to ask the question and I'm going to answer it, but, do they absolutely need to sign Cespedes? And can they? I mean, the question is, and I'll go to question B also. Are they the anti-Cubs and, not as great hitting, but a stacked pitching staff? So I'll say this much. As much as the love affair there is for Yoenis Cespedes, and we loved what he did during that run during August and the early parts of September, I truthfully don't see it being feasible with signing him. Based on
they don't have the money. Where are they going to find the money to sign him?
Where
That's the problem.
Are they going to find the money? Where are they going to find the money for them to make this trade? And I mentioned it many times on Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue that if you listen to Sandy Alderson, he's one of the great baseball minds. Just before the trade, he said, "I was given approval to get a bat to add to the payroll." So let's let us, the Met apologists, the Mets faithful fans know that my hands have been tied for the last 4 years, and I've been piddling around getting this bargain player or this player that's on the decline, or lucked up with Grandy. Maybe we won't say that for the first 2 seasons, but Grandy has come through this season. But what I will say is Cespedes, he's with Rock Nation. He's with, Rock Nation / CAA. They're looking for 6 years, upwards of $150, $175 million deal. Look at other players like Cespedes that play that position. There's no chump change. Lastly, about this one specific question, there's no way the Mets can pay someone more than David Wright. They broke the bank with David Wright with that 8-year $138, and that was a bargain. Are they the anti-Cubs?
All right, let's do it this way.
Okay.
We all know about the Bernie Madoff thing and what that did to the Mets' financial structure. It pretty much destroyed it. Now, I think Sandy Alderson, he got a break in the sense that the Washington Nationals fell apart the way they did. He saw an opportunity. He got ownership to go ahead and agree to bring a bat in basically as a rental. And I do think that's what Cespedes has become. He's a rental. So Alderson makes the deal. He gets Cespedes in, and all of a sudden the Mets become this offensive juggernaut that for the first 3 months of the season they couldn't have done even if you had given them a blueprint. They just didn't have the bats. And you get David Wright back as well, and so all of a sudden the middle of that lineup looks a hell of a lot more imposing than it ever did at any time during the first half of the year. But I do think that Sandy Alderson understands that Cespedes is a rental. I think he's okay with it because he's hoping that the end is going to justify doing this, and so far so good.
And John, they didn't have to give up Wheeler. They've got.
That's right. They didn't. That's right.
They're stocked with pitching, and the fact of the matter is, next season, if it's Lagares, Conforto, and Granderson in that outfield, I think the fans are going to be able to deal with it if you've got a very deep NLCS run or a World Series win. The fans will be able to deal with it.
Absolutely, they will. And the other part of it is, you've got the team on the other side of town that's got an age issue that is going to continue their decline, and so I think the Mets have a window of opportunity to finally take over that city of New York, even if it's for a brief period of time, that I think will allow them to hopefully fix the financial mess that they're trying to get themselves out of.
John, it's a 3-year run. They got a 3-year window, realistically.
I would realistically. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Before the Yankees clear that mess up in the Bronx, with all those age players and those big contracts. The Yankees have 5 players that are making more than $20 million a season, and these guys are like 35 and better.
That's right.
It's crazy, but
look, it's what Brian Cashman did. It's what that ownership did because, again, they were trying to, I don't want to say buy a championship, but they were certainly pointed in that direction. It didn't work. It hasn't worked, and so now Cashman's got to do the opposite, which is you've got to start finding a way to get rid of these guys. Buying them out is going to be awfully expensive for the Yankees to eventually have to do. I'm sure they really don't want to do that because they know what the end result is going to be, at least in the short term. But eventually, these guys are going to have to be dealt with one way or another.
John, the last Yankee pimp slap will be since 2001. They've spent over $2.5 billion in payroll and have one World Series win.
And, that's something that Cashman has to deal with on a regular basis. He's got to explain why, and I think he's getting tired of doing it. And I do think that they've got to turn the page. There's no question about it. The Yankees have to turn the page and begin the process of starting over.
Leave the Yankees alone. Let them do what they're doing. Don't bother them. They're doing just fine. It's okay.
Here's the one thing I'll say is if they did sign Cespedes, I'm not saying they won't make a run at him, but if they did sign him, so then who leaves? Harvey, Syndergaard, or DeGrom? One of those guys has to leave.
There's a domino effect here that I do think Sandy Alderson is not willing to get into.
Right.
That'd be hard. That'd be a hard decision to make, man. That'd be a hard decision.
I'll pass this on to you, Ralph, or to you, Lee.
Well, I just want to say it's going to be great to have Cespedes in the Dodgers outfield next year. So that'll be fantastic. Hopefully he'll continue to produce. I mean, he's great. The thing about Cespedes is not only his power, and he's had really good offensive numbers this year, but he's such a phenomenal defensive player. He really is a 5-tool player, except for maybe the stolen bases. But I mean, he's a guy you want to have on your team for more than one reason. So it's if the Mets could go out, and I know they're limited in cash, but if they could sign anybody, he's the guy you kind of want to sign. So, I hope the Mets, he seems to fit really well in New York as well. So hopefully for Mets fans, he is able to, he's like, hey, you know what, I'm happy here and I want to resign, and maybe I'll take a little bit less money, which I know is a joke, but I'll take a little bit less money than I would to sign somewhere else. So, for Mets fans, I hope Cespedes is back.
That would be an ideal situation, and wouldn't it be nice? Players, hey, John, you remember way back in the days where players didn't have that option. As a matter of fact, there are players on the great Yankee teams who may not have had a great season in the next year. They took a pay cut. These days, it's an absolute joke to think that a player would actually look at himself and say, I know I can make a whole lot of money, but I fit here. I like the way you put that, Lee. It seems like he fits in there when you see him with his teammates in the dugout as he plays with the Mets. But to imagine that a player would say, I'll take a little less. What's a little less? You're still going to get $100+ million probably. But it's highly unlikely because in baseball we know that, as John said, rental players. You can get a rental player in the second half of the season, but when you have a young pitching staff like that, it's hard to give any of those kids up just for that.
Well, let's face it. I do think the one advantage for the Mets is this playoff run. It's going to help them in the merchandising aspect of it, which is where they're going to make some money. So I think that is something that can help them. But if Cespedes was to end up with the Dodgers, then that means that Yasier Puig is gone. Because to me, having both of them in that outfield, I think would be a very difficult thing to pull off. Because you still have Ethier and you still have Crawford and you still have other problems that the Dodgers have got to find a way to solve before they could even give Cespedes any sort of a contract offer. So there going to be options for Cespedes. This is true. I just wonder how many big market first division teams are going to be willing to spend that money for him knowing that they're going to have to get rid of somebody else to make it fit.
You had me at Puig is gone. I'll just say that.
Well, okay, if they find a way to trade Puig, which I do think they have to do, just based on the off-the-field nonsense that I do think the organization is really growing tired of, they've got to find somebody that's willing to take him. So who are the suitors?
I don't know. The Cubs, the Braves. I don't know. Not the Cubs. I'm joking about that. But the Braves seem like they want as many Cubans as possible, so maybe the Braves.
Hey,
I mean, that's the thing the Dodgers have to do right off the bat. They've got to create a trade market for those players that they just have got to find a way to get rid of.
Yeah,
very true. I got to jump in here and say there's one thing we hadn't mentioned. I know we're talking Mets right now, and I'm perseverating a little slightly over this. The one player they do need to bring back next season, and I'm sure you guys are going to rip me about this, you got to bring back Bartolo Colon. Why?
Oh, no, I have no problem with that, and I'll tell you why. The first 2 months of the year, I think Bartolo Colon saved that rotation.
Yes. Here's a guy who's thrown, in the last 2 seasons, 29 wins, 400 innings he's chewed up. Where there is no issues with inning limitations and pitch counts with this guy. He's thrown 400 innings. You need a guy like that that's going to chew up innings because, you've got these young arms that are going to need to skip a start here and there. And especially with Wheeler coming back next year.
My question is, how is Bartolo Colon doing this at age 42? Assuming he is 42.
I was going to say, he might be closer to 50, guys. You know what happens?
And I wouldn't be surprised if he is closer to 50, to be honest.
You know what happens, John? This is a guy from the old days. And again, I don't know what happened, what changed. I can't even remember. I know my memory is really bad, but I can't remember the phrase pitch count growing up in baseball. Guys went out there and threw. The guys went out there with the idea there were 20-game winners all over baseball because guys pitched innings. And this is a guy who, as you get older and you get more, you get more into your career in baseball, especially as a pitcher, when you're young, you can throw hard, you can throw fast, you have plenty of, and eventually you have to change your way and adapt to what your body's allowing you to do. And, Colon is one of those guys. He just adapts. John, he's just one of those workhorses from the old days where, look, if you give me 300 innings, I'll take the 300.
But that body doesn't necessarily suggest that he can do what he's doing.
Hey, John.
This is not a guy that takes care of himself. Let's face it.
John, there's a lot of fat guys. There's a lot of fat guys out there wearing football uniforms, and I ask myself,
yeah, but we're talking baseball here. We're not talking football. And fat guys in baseball, I think, with the wear and tear on the arms and the shoulders and so forth, it doesn't lead to the kind of career that Colon is having, especially what I would call the second half of his career.
That would depend on the brand of grease you're using, John, because some grease sticks more than others. So obviously,
well, I want to know the grease he's using because I may need it at some point myself.
Hey, his name is Colon, papi. He's using some of that Spanish stuff que nosotros usamos para, tú sabes, hacer cosas así. That's what we do, man.
Well, I think that Colon changed his name from Sid Fernandez at some point and is the grandfather of Jesse Orozco, but I might be wrong.
Wow.
That was good. That was good.
Let's just talk about the series. This will be our last talking point. Actually, the series starts tonight, and Dodgers. No, I'm just joking. Mets and Cubs. So I know that at least two of us, want to see the Mets win. So the last question is, who do we want to see and when? Who do we want to see win and why? But the most important question is, who do we actually see winning this series and how? And how important is it for baseball that a big city team is in the series? And we're going to get a big city team, at least one, maybe two if Toronto gets in, but Chicago and New York fill that role. How big is it that for baseball that a big city team is in the series? And John, I'll start with you.
Well, I think if you had somebody from Fox on here, I think they would tell you it would be huge to have at least have one big market city in the World Series. It's going to create the ratings and hopefully create the interest that you're looking for when you put a big stage event like a World Series on. So I think Fox is thrilled with the idea that either Chicago or New York is at least going to be that one big market city that hopefully drives the ratings when you get to the World Series. I would love to see the Cubs get there for the same reason why I saw the Red Sox get there in 2004. It would be for the same reasons, to finally get that gorilla off their back and to finally allow a city to realize what a World Series champion is all about, and to have all of those people, all of those season ticket holders that have suffered for years and years watching bad Cub teams finally get the opportunity to see what they have paid to see for all of these years. So obviously I'd love to see the Cubs pull it off. But I do think the Mets, that young starting staff is quite a daunting task to have to go through. I just don't see the Cubs playing home run derby against the Mets starting staff the way they did against the Cardinals in games 3 and 4 in Wrigley Field.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the series is going to turn on that Mets pitching staff, because just like it's not going to always happen in Game 5, but when you bring in Syndergaard and the guy's throwing 100 miles per hour and that's your reliever, that's a little bit unfair. And I think the Cubs hitters still have a little bit to grow up, and I think that'll be the difference. I do think as far as Fox, for them, they've got to be thinking, if we can somehow get the Cubs, deep in the series or in the World Series, and they have a chance to win a World Series at home, showing that's got to be that's their ideal dream. They can't even think about that at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's important to have New York, but I think New York it may be one of those things where it's a huge city, obviously, but it's so centralized in their fan base. Maybe it doesn't. Not speaking for Ralph, of course, but it doesn't kind of go over the country like, oh, New York's its own thing. But I think the Cubs being in the middle of the country would be better for baseball if they actually, especially since they haven't won a World Series since I think Louis XIV was still in power in France. But yeah, I mean, it would be huge if the Cubs won. But who do I want? I'll say this: who do I want to see win and why? My dad always said, if your team loses, you want to lose to the team that beat you, and hopefully they go on and win it all, and you lose to the best team. So I hope the Mets win just because they beat the Dodgers, but I wouldn't mind seeing the Cubs win either. So, Ralph?
Look, I'll ask Ralph and Ted this because they're New Yorkers. Would Yankee fans switch alliances for 10, 12-day period of time if the Mets got there?
Never. I grew up with a lot of things that was taught to me. This was one of the first things I was taught, and I remember this even though I don't remember this. When my father looked me straight in the face as a little boy and made it very clear to me, boy, we're Met fans. We love the Mets. We hate the Yankees. They are the anti-anything that means anything bad to you. And I have lived my entire life making sure my son became a Yankee fan, and to this day, it'll always play a part in just a little bit of the love that I just can't have for him because he's a Yankee fan. I am such a true Met fan that I don't care if you're my son. You lose points with me because you are a Yankee fan. But with that said, Ted, you have a great show as far as Late Night Parent. Talks about a lot of good stuff and about life and education. And one of the things you learn as a human being is, look, we only have a limited amount of time on this thing we call planet Earth. To be able to leave one day when I get called home and know that my teams, the New York Mets, the New York Giants, the New York Knicks, though a very long time ago, and the New York Islanders, I'd be able to go to my resting place knowing that I rooted for champions. For the New York Mets to win a World Series one more time I can't even begin to say in words what that will mean. I'm my body is in bad shape, as you boys know. I get, a little more fragile every day. I get afraid I'm going to jump out of this wheelchair and really hurt myself if they win the World Series. But I'm willing to take that chance. But I'm also willing to say this. If my New York Mets do not make it to the World Series, I will root so heavy for the Chicago Cubs, for the city of Chicago, for all Chicago Cubs fans everywhere, because if my Mets don't win another World Series in my lifetime, to be able to go to the grave and say that I was able to witness the Boston Red Sox finally winning a World Series, and then the Chicago Cubs, by the way, with the same GM, oh yeah, I can definitely root for that. And as far as a World Series is concerned, think about this, boys. The war across the border, Canada against the U.S., the Chicago Cubs and the Toronto Blue Jays. Wow, that's going to be a war of baseball sports words for 7 games.
Here's another question I have. The casual baseball fan, the one that doesn't really follow the 162-game schedule, if the Cubs were to make it, would that casual fan all of a sudden tune in because it's the Cubs and because of what they're trying to accomplish?
God, we're a world of bandwagon jumpers, of course.
Yes.
We're a world of bandwagon.
Yes.
So then that would be the reason why Fox would really end up being excited about a Cub team making it, because they're hoping and betting that the casual baseball fan will all of a sudden tune in because of what they're trying to pull off.
The casual novice fan, yes.
Right.
That's what any network tries to do, is to get that person who really is kind of like on the bubble. But you say something that's like in vogue, like, oh, the Cubs are in the World Series, and everyone, an eyebrow goes up. You get their attention. You're like, oh, okay, I'll tune in, or I'll go into the bar. I'll somehow be connected. I'll go get a baseball cap or something like that. But to piggyback off of what Ralph said, as being a native New Yorker, lived here all my life, I will say this much: in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, you're asked one thing: are you Yankees, Giants, or Jets, Mets?
That's interesting.
And you better have an answer, and you better have the right answer, because.
But wait a minute, there are some Red Sox fans in Connecticut.
Well, that's unfortunate, John, but you're right.
Yeah, that really is. But you're asked that question because you're Jets, Mets, or you're Yankees, Giants. Plain and simple.
Well, actually, Ted, I'm Giants, Mets.
Yeah, that doesn't. Yeah, how did that happen?
I've always bucked the system, John. I've always bucked it.
I will tell you this much: I will root for the Cubs next season to break the curse, because this year is the Mets' year. But by some strange reason, the Cubs do beat the Mets. I would definitely root for the Cubs.
Oh man, you got to. You got to. But listen, guys, before we get off this show, first thing I want to say is it has been absolutely so much fun with you guys doing this show. For those listening out there, of course, hey, the Happy Hour Network brings this show and Late Night Parent with us at NGSC Sports. We love it so much. There's only one thing that I will take away from this show that will bother me, and since I'm an honest guy, I want to say it live on the air. All references on this show from the other guys on this show about anyone else winning the World Series besides the Mets, I do not endorse it. I do not agree with it, and I do not sponsor that, because I want to make it very, very clear. We are here to win a World Series. World Series and the playoffs make so many memories. But John, old school, will always say, what wins you a world title? That's pitching. My baseball team has a pitching staff. But no matter how it goes, guys, for me, I told John last night, this has been the best baseball playoffs I've enjoyed in nearly 20 years.
Well, wait a minute. They got to catch the ball, too, and I think that's the other part of it. I mean, you can throw it all you want, but if you can't catch it, then you still have issues.
Well,
so I just want to say,
Ralph Garcia better catch it, or he's not going to get out of that stadium.
Ralph Garcia has officially endorsed the Toronto Blue Jays as his favorite team, and so we want to just joking, Ralph. Of course, it's Mets. We want to thank both you guys for being on. It's been a really fun show for speaking for Ted and myself. Will you let, besides NGSC Sports, you guys let everybody know where you personally can be found on Twitter or wherever else you want to let them know?
John?
Well, from time to time I do show up on Twitter. It's Radio Doucette, and although I don't do it on a regular basis, as much as you and Ted do it, Lee. I mean, you guys are on there constantly, it appears. But every once in a while I do poke my nose in there to see what's going on.
And as far as I'm concerned, you want to find me personally on Twitter, you can find me at El Rafito 322. That is ELRAFITO. Rafito happens to be my nickname as a child growing up. That will be El Rafito 322. And of course, remember the company handle at NGSC Sports. And don't forget, everybody, to log on to ngscsports.com for all the current content, all the shows. Speaking of current content, folks, this morning on NGSC Sports, we always make sure to have our Saturday edition by Lee Vowell himself, and it is entitled Michigan Football is Alive and Well. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so very much for having me and John on the show, and I'm all for fun shows, and I will be as honest as I can be. I've actually had a couple of goosebumps, hair standing up, and a little tingles on this show, boys. Thank you.
Guys, it's been great to be on with you. I look forward to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got to do this again sometime, definitely. So thank you.
I think what we got to do, Ralph, is we got to bring them on in the batter's box. I think that's what we have to do now.
We're open.
I think that would be an outstanding idea.
Absolutely. Let's work that out. So thanks for being on. All right.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
You too.
All right. Thanks so much.
Well, that was a very, very fun show, I thought, Ted. It's one of those things where it's like, when you add people to the show, I'm never, because I'm such a control freak, that I'm never really sure how it's gonna turn out. But that turned out perfectly, I thought. Hopefully, the listeners, here I am talking about it, and the listeners are like, "Oh my God, Lee was awful." But hopefully it turned out well for the listeners as well. So
it was like I think it was Star Trek V. When the Klingons and what's the name? Jim Kirk and his crew and the Enterprise crew were drinking Romulan ale together, and everyone was kind of untrusting of the other. But with the end,
it could be true. I'm actually going to stop you for a second, Ted, because it's the end of the show anyway. I'm laughing because the show waited for an hour and 17 minutes, and you finally went Megatronic at the end. So it's just the tradition is still alive, much like the streak. All right, I'm going to end the show. I'm going to mute you, Ted. Sorry, I'm sure fans are enjoying that. But everyone, thanks for listening. We will be having live shows throughout the playoffs, hopefully twice a week. At least next Saturday we will be live 10 a.m. as well, and hopefully at some point next week. But thanks for listening. And here's our... I do want to thank... Hey, Ted unmuted himself because he wants to bring the Megatronic back. But I do want to thank... and you're still Megatronic. That's awesome. I do want to thank Ralph Garcia and John Doucette of In the Batter's Box NGSC Sports overall for being on the show. It was a great show. So thank you, John and Ralph, very much for being on. Enjoy the outro.
The fans hoping to catch a little bit of the old-time religion right here, baby. With Junior stepping up to the plate. Here comes the stretch. And the pitch to Junior on the way. Swing and a fly ball hit to deep right center field. That baby is going to be fly away. The old-time religion lives. Junior does it. A 2-run home run.